Hey everyone, welcome to Movie Marathons HQ, where we do movie marathons and watch some of our favorite movies. This video is part of the Avengers Doomsday movie marathon, where we watch one movie every week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026. Today we're discussing X-Men First Class, released in 2011 and directed by Matthew Vaughn. This is the first X-Men movie in the movie marathon. And while it may not connect directly to Doomsday, the next movie in the series, X-Men Days of Future Past, features some of the actors that have been confirmed for Doomsday, like Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen, Rebecca Romijn, Kelsey Grammer. So they're all in that movie, and I think it would be really unfulfilling to watch Days of Future Past in a movie marathon without having watched First Class. So that's why First Class is part of the movie marathon. Back to X-Men First Class. I absolutely love this movie. This might be my favorite X-Men movie of all time. I'll figure that out as I rewatch some of these as part of this marathon, but I love it from beginning to end, and I'm going to have a lot more positives than negatives in this review. For X-Men First Class, for positives, I have the casting, the fact that it's a reboot, the setting and production design, the musical score, and the plot in general. And for negatives, I have that one of the character deaths is upsetting and kind of unfulfilling, and some of the timeline and continuity doesn't really work. As far as casting, that's another positive. It's really hard to build upon perfect casting like Patrick Stewart for Charles Xavier and Ian McKellen for Eric Lensher, but they somehow struck gold twice with James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender. They are just as perfect in their younger roles as the other actors are in their older roles. And watching this back, we also have a young Jennifer Lawrence and a young Nicholas Hoult, who have both gone on to have huge careers and very successful roles throughout Hollywood. And not to mention the legendary Kevin Bacon, who has a villain turn in Sebastian Shaw. The fact that this is a reboot is a positive for me. By this point, we had seen a Batman reboot. We had had a Superman movie that felt to most people like a reboot, even though technically it wasn't, in Superman Returns. We had had a Punisher reboot, and a Spider-Man reboot had been announced but not yet released at the time of X-Men First Class. So with all these reboots, it seemed like, why are we rebooting the X-Men? They just came out with their first X-Men movie about 10 years ago. I think, though, that this reboot was necessary and was very helpful. The previous X-Men trilogy started off strong, but the third movie, X-Men The Last Stand, made a lot of weird decisions and killed a lot of enthusiasm for the franchise. They also, in those movies, made the choice to have Wolverine as the main character. And I do like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, but him as the main character just never really worked in any of the three movies. I think maybe in X-Men United, that worked best to have him as the main character. But in First Class, they took the emphasis off of Wolverine, although he has a very fun cameo, and they put the emphasis back on other founding X-Men team members, like Charles Xavier and Eric Lensher. The building of their relationship, their worldviews coming into some clash with each other really works a lot better and allows all the other characters more time to shine. The setting and production design of this movie is also another positive for me. I love setting it in the 60s, right around the Cuban Missile Crisis. This must be an alternate timeline because of how things go down, but setting it there gives us as audiences some clues about the world context that these mutants are in. And I just think the costumes are fun and the hair is fun and just the way they act is really fun because they're in the 60s. I also really like, in one of the scenes, we see the X Mansion, which is supposedly set in New York in the United States, but this was actually filmed in Canada, in Victoria, British Columbia. And a few years ago, we went to visit Victoria and we made a stop at this castle. It's called Hatley Castle. My wife is not an X-Men fan, but when we got there and we read the information, and I said, I've seen this before, and sure enough, it's the X Mansion. So here's a picture of me in front of the X Mansion doing my best X-type pose. I realize it looks like the Wakanda Forever pose, but this is the best I had. But I think the setting of this movie really works. Especially, there's a few scenes that take place in other countries, And rather than the characters just speaking English, they had the actors learn the lines in other languages like French and Spanish and German. And as a language nerd, I love that. So I really like these scenes where the actors are speaking other languages. I know you can't do that all the time, but these actors had the aptitude to speak other languages than English, and I really like that. The musical score in this movie is very well done. It was scored by Henry Jackman, and I think there are parts of the movie where the score comes in and just paints a lot of emotion into the scene, both in the action moments and in the character moments and slower moments. I think the X-Men musical category has a very high bar, with the animated series intro song just being so rad. But even the previous X-Men trilogy had some very good musical scores. So the First Class one stands on its own, and there are some moments in the movie that are elevated by the musical score. So I really like that. Finally, the plot of this movie is just awesome. I really like how it sets up that Charles has this theory on mutants, but hasn't really revealed himself to the world and doesn't feel the time is right. As things progress, he meets Eric, who's on a very different path, but their goals align, that they want to stop Sebastian Shaw because they know that he's up to no good. But as the movie goes and they build their friendship and they build this love and they build this brotherhood, then it culminates and you see that Magneto and Professor X are never going to see eye to eye on how to coexist with mutants and humans. And so you buy it from where they go from now on, that they have this respect for one another, but they're never going to be on the same team. And there's just some great scenes. The scene where Charles is reading Eric's mind and finds that beautiful memory from when he was a child with him and his mother, and uses that to help unlock his abilities. There's also the montage of all the other mutants kind of learning their thing, and Beast, whose little self-experiment goes wrong and he becomes the Beast in some really good practical makeup. He's more feline than I like, but many of the comic book art has Beast traditionally as more feline looking. Other artists kind of make him more canine looking and something in between, so I think that works. But the culmination in this movie, the final scene where, spoiler alert, where Magneto moves the coin through Shaw's head, killing him, while Charles is telepathically linked to Shaw and experiencing that moment through his telepathy. That's just comic book goodness. And the way it's shot, the way it's edited, and the music culminating in that scene is one of my favorite X-Men scenes of all time. One of the character deaths is a negative for me. The character Armando, who's called Darwin in the comics, is killed off, and the way that they do it is just really unfulfilling. He gets a plasma energy ball type thing put in his mouth, which he just literally takes it and swallows it, and then just starts crumbling. But his whole power is based on adapting to survive. He should have been able to adapt somehow, and maybe it was too powerful, he couldn't adapt. But it just seemed like he's in the movie just to be killed off, but he's the one character you shouldn't be able to kill off. So it's just really unfulfilling. As this is a reboot, and you would think it connects to the continuity of the previous X-Men movies, it seems like they don't really care about continuity. So there's some retcons that happen where I'm okay with this one in the beginning, where they show some of the scenes from the original X-Men movie back in the concentration camp, and then Eric is pulled in and they've got a further scene with Eric and Sebastian Shaw. That kind of works for me. But then as you go through the rest of the movie, there's some things that don't line up with the other three movies in who's who and how they know each other and things like that. I just don't think they cared. They just wanted to make one movie at a time, and so they just made this movie how they wanted to make this movie, and they didn't worry too much about continuity. Now, how might X-Men First Class connect to Avengers Doomsday? I don't think it's going to connect that much. So there's actors in this movie who portray Professor X, Magneto, Mystique, and Beast, and their other actor counterparts are going to make an appearance in Doomsday, but they're not going to be portrayed by these actors. So unless further cast announcements are coming, which I do think they are, but at this time, nobody in this movie is at least announced to be in Doomsday. if they do an Avengers versus X-Men thing, maybe they have two versions of Magneto and two versions of Professor X and two versions of Beast and two versions of Mystique. That is possible, but I'm not totally sure. Another way that X-Men First Class might connect to Avengers Doomsday is in the movie Deadpool 2, not in the main continuity, but Deadpool and Wolverine is in the MCU. But in Deadpool 2, there's a really quick cameo of Nicholas Hoult as Beast and James McAvoy as Professor X. So since those characters had that cameo in Deadpool 2, and there's no confirmation at this point that Ryan Reynolds or Deadpool will be in Avengers, so even that's a stretch, but that's a potential connection to Deadpool 2, to Avengers Doomsday, but again, I won't hold my breath there. So that's my review of X-Men First Class. What do you think of this movie, and how do you think it may connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in the comments. Make sure to follow Movie Marathons HQ on Instagram, TikTok, and on Letterboxd. The next movie in the movie marathon for Avengers Doomsday is The Fantastic Four: First Steps. See you at the movies!